Good morning. This is Sean with Price Realtors with this week's market report. And last week we saw a pretty significant uptick in seller activity in conjunction with a downward trend in buyer activity. Um, but there's a pattern that's starting to emerge, and it's something that I think is important to understand. So this week for the 7 days, buyer activity was up 10%, seller activity was down by 3%. So what we're starting to see is we're starting to see so this orange line is our buyer activity, blue line is seller. So we can see that seller activity went up last week while buyer activity went down. And then seller activity came down this week while buyer activity went up. So what's happening there? Well, you can see that buyer activity in general is on a pretty solid trend up. And that has not changed since, this was back in the winter. So it's been a pretty solid trend up. This buyer activity is at a higher level than we were last summer. This was last summer right here. So we're at a level that's above that. So what's ended up happening is buyer activity is actually following what's happening with sellers because it's following what inventory is on the market. So for example, um, seller activity went up here, buyer activity the next week went up significantly. Seller activity went down for 2 weeks, which meant that inventory went down for 2 weeks. So therefore, buyer activity went down because there wasn't enough inventory for those buyers to purchase. Seller activity then went up again, which means buyer activity went up because there was more inventory to purchase. And then seller activity kind of plateaued or went down by 3%. So buyer activity likely next week, I'm going to say would probably go up a little bit more because it wasn't this didn't fully make it to get all this inventory, but it might kind of plateau out a little bit as well next week. So in other words, you'll see that the seller's market, while it was a really hot seller's market on this week, it seems like it's kind of calming down. I don't think that the seller's market is actually calming down. What's ended up happening is that there's just not enough inventory for the buyers to purchase because we're still seeing on most properties it's a multi-offer situation. Most properties are going above ask. We have been able to get a couple contracts for our buyers at or close to ask without the multiple offers, but there's a lot of work that has to be done and a lot that we have to do to find off-market deals and so on. So for the most part, what's happening is the buyers are out there. There's just not enough inventory for that buyer activity to actually show the amount of buyers that are there. For every property that's going pending that had multiple offers, 5, 6, 7 offers, that's only one buyer that got a property. That's 5 or 6 buyers that are not showing up on this chart. So just keep that in mind as you're looking at this. What does that mean for sellers? Sellers, this is a phenomenal time for you to sell and get top dollar for your property. And buyers, still a great opportunity for you to buy as long as you can be strategic about it. But with the interest rates where they are, you have, a lot more buying power. So it is still a good time to buy. And appreciation is still occurring, and they're expecting it to continue to occur for at least another 12 to 24 months, which means that if you wait, even if the market does flatten out at that point, you're going to have appreciated to a point that you're still paying a lot more for properties. So now is the time to buy. And you can always use the perspective of, your parents, they bought a house 30 years ago. Do you think that they are complaining about what their house is worth now? That property has appreciated dramatically. So it is still a good time. Yes, it's competitive. Yes, you're overpaying in the current market. But when you think about that over a 3 to 5 year period, you're going to be brilliant if you brought a property at this point because it's going to continue to appreciate. All right. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to let me know, and we will see you on next week's market report. Have a great day.